Yeah,
central service.
for 6,000
6,000.
instead of 15. Instead of having 15 budgeted, there's 6 budgeted. 9 cut. Okay, anything? Next fund.
Are there any other questions on the central services?
One fast one.
Okay, one fast one.
I'll forget it, I'll bring it up later.
No, bring it up now.
Okay. How about the newsletter? I was talking to Brad about that, how much that actually cost us. Sorry. I was talking to Brad about how much that newsletter costs the city, and I was thinking, if the council wants to go along with it, that instead of doing the newsletter, putting it into the water bills, because we're allowed up to how many pages, Brad?
Before the postage rates go up on the water bills, we're allowed 2 additional pages of standard weight paper that can be printed front and back. There is a cost associated with the printing and the insertion of those, but the postage level stays the same for those 2 additional pages.
Okay, and by like 1 month would be the park district, 1 month would be the school district, 1 month would be the library, and so forth. It would help us with our postage on saving on the water bill. I don't know if other taxing bodies are in favor of us yet. There was no discussion about it. But if the council is looking to save more money, that's another option.
Well, a couple comments. First of all, I had a discussion with the other taxing bodies this past Monday, and they're not in favor of it. Number two, you need to realize that if we're limited to 4 pages, 2 front and back, our newsletter is now 24 pages. So I think I would call that a reduction in service level. If we're cutting our quote newsletter down from 24 pages to 4 pages, obviously we can't put it all in there.
Well, I think you informing me that other taxing bodies are informed.
Excuse me? I'm sorry?
I thank you for telling me that they weren't in favor of it.
We talked about that at my meeting on Monday, and they were not particularly in favor of it.
Thanks for telling me.
And then there's multi-dwelling residents that might not get the news because there'd be a single water bill versus, multiple. And then, so it might be a little sketchy. Alderman Eugene Wesley.
One other question. The sales tax rebate program for Thornton Gas Station, have they pulled a permit yet?
Yes, they have.
So will they probably get all into that 55?
They want to open up as soon as they can, and I think what we've done is taken, the estimate that we might be paying the first year and plugging it into the budget.
But that might be a little less than if they aren't.
Correct, yeah. Based upon the presentations that they gave and the numbers they provided us, assuming all that holds true, that would be our maximum exposure based upon
55.
their, yeah.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have.
Okay, anything else? On the, on this fund? Okay, Mr. Douthwaite, is there another fund that you have to go through or no?
It was 1, 2, 3, 4. We're almost done.
Okay,
Trust me. The next one is a tourism fund.
okay,
Page 154 is the narrative. 155 is the target level, which is down about $180,000. And that's mostly because we don't have to buy any more properties on Commercial Street. And page 156 and 157 are the line items for the tourism fund. This does not affect not directly affect our general fund. Unless you'd want to take some money in the general fund and move it over to the tourism fund.
Alderman Police?
We already are, aren't we, with the retaining wall for Wooddale and Irving?
Right.
So,
That's going to the capital projects fund.
well, here you got another, to the general fund, you got 65,000 operations transfer.
That's from the tourism fund to the capital projects fund. And one up is,
Yeah, you got to the general fund and then to capital projects fund. So we are, right?
Yeah, we are. That's to cover the overhead, the O&M on the building, phones, lights,
Right.
just kind of things similar to the one that we do out of the water and sewer fund and the other, some of the other funds.
And Brad, one follow-up. I'm basically figuring about 100,000 left over in this budget.
Estimated ending fund balance, correct.
Okay.
Alderman Shockey?
Since we did change the ornamental streetlights to the CIP, and then we canceled it, don't you think we should put the 50,000 back in to the tourism fund to continue on the lights?
I think that would be a policy call for the 8 of you to make, if you want to continue the streetlights in the same manner that you had previously been funding them.
If we don't, we're dropping them, and I wouldn't like to see that happen. So I'd like to suggest we put back the $50,000 for the ornamental streetlights.
Okay, there's a suggestion to put back the 50,000 for streetlights. Does anyone,
I'll make a motion that we put the money back in.
you want to second that, Alderman Shockey? Alderman Shockey just seconded it, I'm sorry, Alderman Coles. Okay, there's a second to put in back 50,000. Alderman Eugene Wesley?
Are you looking at putting it back out of tourism fund? So how does that affect our, I'll get down to it, on our CIP then, if we take that back, that we already cut them and now we're putting them back in? I mean, where does that leave us?
It's nothing to do with the CIP.
Yeah, because they were under the CIP.
We took them out.
Right, but now we ask him put them back under, are you looking to install them out of the tourism fund? Because we put in the CIP. Right. And we cut the CIP.
But we canceled the ornamental lights from the CIP fund.
So are you asking that those ornamental lights come out of the tourism fund now?
Yes, where they were all along.
I'll amend the motion that we put it back in to the fund from the tourism and no other place. Does the second accept that? It's basically just verbiage.
Do you accept that?
Yeah.
Okay,
Wait, I believe they got a conversation.
okay, there's a motion and a second. Is there anything on the question? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Mr. Mayor?
Did you make the adjustment on salaries from Mimi to Jeff? On funding a percentage of his salary out of tourism?
If you would like us to make that adjustment, we certainly can. Currently, that is a percentage of Ms. Anderson's salary and associated FICA and IMRF, but if you'd like us to switch it to Mr. Murmas, due to his extended work on the Prairie Fest, we can certainly make that adjustment.
Which, for the council's benefit, Mimi Anderson used to be in charge of special events, but she hasn't done that for the last couple of years, but that's still funded out of tourism, which would be inappropriate. But it would be appropriate to fund a percentage of Mr. Murmas' salary out of tourism, since he's now in charge of that. And that actually is less out of general fund and more out of tourism then, which makes financial sense. Good luck.
Get a pat on the back.
So this would be an adjustment on the general, and it would also be an adjustment in tourism. Do you have a number?
I think the rough number I had earlier was around $8,000 probably.
Additional?
Correct.
Okay, does anyone disagree with that? Raise your hand. Okay, if not, Alderman Eugene Wesley, did you have something?
Yeah, I just got a question on the dial ride driver. That's a part-time employee?
It's more than one.
There's two, but yes, they are both part-time employees, yes.
And where does IMRF expenditure fall under a dial ride service when they're part-timer? Or is that not, or is that in there?
One of the two dial-a-ride drivers, as I understand it, was previously a full-time employee of the city, and therefore she was grandfathered in under her previous full-time status with the city.
Well, whoa, wait a minute. Back up here. She was a full-timer and she went to part-time and we grandfather her in at her full-time salary or full-time RMF.
Well, the way the IMRF calculation works is it takes the highest 96 months of your last, I think it's 120 months. So if she runs out the string as just a part-time dial-a-ride driver, her pension will be based at her part-time dial-a-ride driver's salary, not her full-time salary. Because the way it calculates, as those higher periods roll off, the pension gets adjusted down to reflect that. That way, correct, yes. And as Mr. Douthwaite just pointed out, we only pay, the city's contributions is based upon her current earnings, not any previous earnings.
Now, does she also give vacation time too? Is that part-timer?
I believe since she's part-time, she's straight hourly, so if she doesn't work, she doesn't get paid.
Alderman Roy Wesley.
So you're what you're saying is part-timer that's doing the dial ride is not collecting a pension from IMRF right now? She is a part-timer and we're paying into IMRF?
For one of the two dial-a-ride drivers, yes, we are paying into IMRF. She's not currently collecting like payments from IMRF, but yes, she is in the pension plan, correct?
So she's losing money then,
Yeah, sounds like it.
technically, but that's okay. How many, if they're under 1,000 hours, though, we don't have to pay to IMRF, correct?
For new employees, that's correct, but since she was in the plan under the 600-hour plan, the plan did provide a caveat to continue those people on since they were in there. I believe she's the only one that got grandfathered in under the old plan like that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, I believe you have consensus on the, moving the 50 in, because we took the vote on it, and then, for the lights, and then that's it. Next fund, Mr. Douthwaite?
Projects Fund. And all this does is restate what you did when you passed the capital improvement program a couple months ago. It takes all the projects that you approved, other than the 710,000 you knocked out a couple weeks ago, and just puts them into a line item. So there's no, unless you want to eliminate a project, there's nothing much you can do about this particular fund.
Alderman Eugene Wesley?
I just have one question. So we just made a motion, we cut the lights out capital projects and we put it back into the tourism fund. So now our capital project is not down to 750,000 because we just put it back, all we did is move it into the tourism fund. So technically, how much did we cut out capital projects then after taking so it's 700,000 we cut? Because if we just moved it back in, so you didn't cut that project off.
I'm going to ask Brad to answer that because I don't really, frankly didn't understand the motion. I thought it was to move the project back into the tourism fund. But if it wasn't budgeted from the general fund to begin with, it wouldn't have an impact on the general fund.
But doesn't the engineering come out of the CIP for the lights?
I'm confused.
I'm just confused here. A week ago, we sat here and we cut 4 projects or 3 projects. Brought us down to $750,000 out of CIP that we cut. Decorating lighting was one of them. I have no problem putting it back in tourism fund, but your $750,000 that we cut out of CIP is 710 is now not 710 because you just took the tourism fund and you took that capital project that was scheduled for those lights and put it in the tourism fund. So I'm a little, the numbers aren't there. Go ahead. I mean,
Mr.
I'm sorry.
Wilson, yeah.
The 710 that you cut is still 710. The addition of the $50,000 in the tourism fund only has an impact on the ending fund balance of the tourism fund. You didn't move any money from the capital projects, you didn't move any money from the general fund or anything like that. You cut the project out of the general capital projects fund last week. You cut the 240 out, or 3 weeks ago, whatever it was. The restoration of that project in the tourism fund was just placing it back from whence it came. Because it was in tourism even this year. I think they just finished up the project this year. And the money for the lights, the money for the engineering, and all that stuff came out of the tourism fund. So next year, when we do the decorative light project for $50,000, all of that money is going to come out of the tourism fund. At this point, 2 weeks ago, when you cut it out of the general capital projects fund, it was gone. So the tourism fund is, kind of on its own little island.
So we funded, so what you're saying now is
You-
we're
you just-
funding the streetlight project that we cut out of CIP. All we did is move that back in the tourism fund. Tourism fund is going to pay for the decorating lights. Am I
Correct.
correct?
Yes,
So that's the engineering and everything for 50,000.
correct.
But we still at 710,000 cut out of the CIP that we cut last week.
Correct.
Okay. That's fine. I believe he's got a question.
Alderman Police.
Yeah, I got a couple on,
I know.
on the capital projects. I spoke to Mr. Kramer before the meeting on the CIP on page 26. Got that generator for Public Works building, 225,000. I go, do we really need that right now? Or could we wait to see if we get the money from the state? I go, I think 21 years we haven't used it. He goes, if you guys want to take it out, he goes, like you said, we've done it without. He goes, it's nice to have in case of emergency, but if you guys want to cut it out, he goes, I don't have a big problem with that. I say we take it out.
Mr. Douthat?
It's a council call. If you want to take $225,000 in a capital project and move that money back from the capital fund to the general fund to boost your cash balance, you can certainly do that.
Well, the bottom line is, these projects we're taking out, basically we're taking them out because the state isn't paying us. If the state pays us, then these projects, I'm sure staff would come forward and say, hey, listen, I think the retaining or the window walls in the rotunda, City Hall is one of the projects that's out.
Well, I'm going to try and explain this as simply as I can, but and if I confuse you, I apologize. The General Capital Improvement Fund right now pretty much stands on its own without any subsidy from the general fund. The projects in that capital fund are funded from the home rule, the city-only sales tax, and the utility tax. Okay, those are always earmarked. When that motion was made a couple weeks ago to cut $710,000 in capital projects, we didn't just cut them out and add $700,000 to the fund balance in the capital fund. We took $700,000 from the capital fund revenues, i.e. utility tax, and moved it back over as a subsidy to the general fund to boost your fund balance, which you've never done that before. Now you're sort of subsidizing the general fund through part of your utility fund revenues. And that's the first time since I've been around that that has happened. You didn't just whack out 700,000 and leave that money in the fund balance in the capital fund. You actually made a transfer over to the general fund to increase that already high reserve.
But the reason we're doing this is so we don't dip, let's say the state doesn't give us the $1 million, we're not dipping into the reserves this year in case the state does come through. Am I correct? I mean, that's why these other projects were cut already.
Yeah, because if the state doesn't come through with that $875,000, your ending balance, your surplus, as we started the discussion tonight, was $245,000, which you're gonna add to your 10.6 million that's already in the bank.
I got no problem with that.
Plus,
Okay, so the discussion is on what, the generator?
Well, yeah, I think the discussion's on the generator. Do you want to subsidize your general fund surplus by $225,000 by knocking this project out and putting another $225,000 in utility tax into the general fund?
I'd like to just leave it in that fund and not spend it yet, but that's just my opinion. Alderman Eugene Wesley.
back up here, Mr. City Manager, also, you have to figure out, that's our surplus, but that ain't counting the 3% that was discussed. Is that counting the 3% that wasn't spent in this year's budget, that we ballpark figure? So our surplus is actually going to be higher because there's projects that we did not do for this year's budget. So you take whatever, ending balance 2.45, and whatever we did today, I don't even know, and hopefully you got a calculator what we did tonight.
And let me throw one more into the mix, just to make it a little more complicated. In 2011, if you look at the cash flow and the revenues from the capital fund, $1 million is coming from the utility tax. Now, if you've identified 710, and now we're looking at another 225, that's $935,000. And we can say all of that will come from the utility tax. If you start cutting much more from the capital fund, then that money's coming out of the home rule or the non-home rule sales tax, which you all sort of made a moral pledge not to touch and to leave it for infrastructure. So you're running those revenues down awful tight in terms of the flexibility that you've got to move money around anymore this year.
Man,
Yes.
I know you had it, I would rather leave it there right now until we see what the bottom numbers are. Because we, like you said, a 3% plus we have to add back in there that we're going, hopefully we didn't overspend our budget this year. And then whatever calculations, we are, right now, we started off with $245,595 surplus. Am I correct?
If you assume that all of these cuts tonight hold true, and some of them haven't, yeah, you're at about 245,000 surplus.
So in my opinion, I like to, we did whatever cuts I feel that we did on CIP to leave as is. And if we have to go back in there and cut more, then we could cut more. But I like to leave that generator in there at this time.
I would too. I say we leave it budgeted, have it slated to do. Alderman Police?
Wally, if we cut it, the money has to go into the capital, into the general fund, or
No,
it can stay?
It can stay in the
stay
capital
here,
fund.
and in, let's say, July, basically all we gotta do is say, you know what, we're getting some of the money, John can go and put it out for bid.
Yeah.
Leave it there.
You don't even have to wait for that, because it's not gonna have, if you decide you want to do it in July, it's not, if the money's still sitting in the capital fund, it's not gonna have an impact on your general fund. All you're doing is you're stuck piling cash in the capital fund.
Right, but if we don't stop it now, you can put it out for bid May 1st and in May 15th.
But
And you
that don't mean that we have to take that bid either.
That's
We can
right.
shoot it
You don't
down.
have to do that. We can keep rocking on along and putting out the bid specs and you can decide when it's time to go to bid that you don't want to do it. Or we can sit here and wait until you say the time's right, put the bid specs together. Either way, we can work either way. But as long as you're not moving that money from the capital fund to the general operating fund, it doesn't make a dime's worth of difference.
My thing was, cut it for now, leave it in CIP, and see if we need it. That's
Okay, so far, 3 people have spoken on it, that Alderman Police is in favor of cutting it, but leaving the funding in that fund itself. Alderman Eugene Wesley says, keep it budgeted. I say keep it budgeted. Does anyone feel strongly on this?
Leave it in.
So then I'm thinking that there's concurrence to keep it in. Alderman, I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor?
Is the transfer from tourism still in here? 68,000?
Yes, for the.
And what is that
retaining wall.
going to?
It's the replacing the decorative rock at the northeast corner of Wooddale and Irving Park.
The retaining wall.
Jeff,
Where's that,
that's 68,000?
where's that as a line item?
Yeah, that's by where the Freedom Bell used to be. The paper bricks
No, I
over
don't see
there
it listed on the
deteriorating.
projects here, on the next page.
It was in there.
Without going through and adding them up again real quick, it would be under the Public Works Building Improvements line. Just kind of looking at where it's at in the book. It'll be buried in that $443,000, 164.
And my concern, if it's buried, not a specific dedicated fund item, whether it could be challenged later as not used for promoting overnight stays in Wooddale, if you're improving a public works building.
Yeah, I mean, if,
Well, that's a generic line item, but that doesn't mean we can't do it.
I understand, but my point is this is a restricted fund, how you can spend it. So you should be able to trace it as to where specifically it went.
Well, we can trace it as a project, we get project codes for all of these things.
Because I actually thought I saw that decorative stone in the tourism fund, not here.
well, in an effort to try and keep all the capital projects in the capital projects fund, the tourism fund did show a transfer to the general capital project funds, which is reflected as a transfer in on page 163.
That's my point. And where's the expense back out?
Yeah, the expense back is probably buried in that public work building improvement line. I guess, you know,
Again, that's
legally-
my point. So it's not
Yeah.
subject to a legal challenge. It has to be used to promote overnight stays in Wooddale.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I see what you're saying. I mean, if for, legal purposes to, hopefully help us out of a trick bag, if you want us to put a line that says, decorative retaining wall, I mean, it's
think-
just a GL account number. I mean, we can do that. It's,
I think that would be helpful.
yeah. Okay, sure.
Okay, I think you have the direction on that fund, don't you? Okay, next, is there another fund before we go into Alderman Roy Wesley's
Yes, there
request?
are. There's 3 more or 4 more.
Alderman Lewitton?
Mr. Douthwaite, could you just tell me, when you transfer the money from the road and bridge fund, how much did you transfer and where did you transfer it?
It was $150,000 out of the road and bridge fund. And on 163, page 163 of the white binder, you'll see it coming in under the interfund transfer line from the road and bridge fund. And it's listed out in the description
For what purpose?
for the purpose of, typically it would be the resurfacing program, but since that program is on hold this year due to the Elmhurst Street reconstruction, that money will be pledged to the Elmhurst Street reconstruction project.
Can you check back to when that fund started up and see if it was ever a moral decision by this council to use that for bridge replacement? There's certain bridges that are amortized over a course of many, many, many years, like the bridge over Irving Park Road. But it's our bridge. Was there ever any pledge to use that money? Is that why the fund has grown every year? Because it's to be used to pay when final replacement has to come in? Or any other bridge?
I'd have to go back and,
Or several bridges collectively?
yeah, I'd have to go back and try and research that to see if there was ever a moral pledge to that. I know the Road and Bridge Fund, just by its definition, can only be used for roadway projects or bridge projects. I'm not sure as to the ownership of the bridge on Irving Park. My understanding is that the only bridge that the city owns is the bridge over Salt Creek on Elizabeth Drive.
But
That's
that
the
might
only-
have to be straightened out.
Well, Route 19 is a state road, so I don't know.
No, not
particularly how that
Route
would be
19,
ours.
Elizabeth Road, the one you just mentioned.
Correct, yeah, that is our bridge, that is correct.
And it's a 15-mile or 10-mile-an-hour zone. And at some point, it's going to be, it would be logical to make that road straight. So and I'm just asking, are we robbing one fund that the money will be needed, that will need that fund in a future year? Maybe 5 years, 10 years from now? But then somebody will have to take out $1 million bond issue because that money was dissipated over all the other years?
Isn't this where we would want to go on and bring it under new business if we're looking at?
Why don't
Wanna
you
take-
research it and we'll do like Alderman Winger says. We'll bring it back up, but let's have a research of original intent.
Wait, research, I'm sorry, what would be researched?
Old records of the council to find out if that bridge money was intended for amortization of the Elizabeth Street Bridge to be replaced at some future time.
I'm going to call in Alderman Shockey.
The fund was, or the bridge was, by past councils, meant to stay the way it is. We've talked about it a number of times in the past, and every time they came to the conclusion that the bridge is fine the way it is, it slows down the traffic, and we didn't want to change that. So we have not put any money in for amortization or anything else.
Okay, and I know I know there's some questions, and I will call on you, Alderman Coles, but I don't
never
want to
mind.
keep going.
Forget it.
I mean, how many other, can we carry this on next Thursday? Or,
We're up against the gun with respect to publishing and notice in the newsletter, the newspapers. If we can't get this done tonight and we take it over to the 15th, I don't think we'll have time to pass it, legally to pass it on the 29th, and it'll bleed over until May, which legally is not a problem. We've got several months after the beginning of the fiscal year to adopt a budget. You don't have to do this by the end of April. Our goal was to do it by the end of April. The commuter parking lot fund,
Sanitation.
the sanitation fund, the water and sewer capital projects fund, and the special service area fund.
what are the hot topics under Water Sewer Capital Projects Fund?
None. You've approved all those
fine.
projects in the CIP. All they are line items which reflected what you did when you approved this.
Okay. Okay, then, Alderman Lewiton, can we have the conversation under new business and determine whether it gets researched or not? Can you bring it up after the budget? And then we can look at that fund and the intent of it.
I acquiesce to your request.
Thank you. Okay, Alderman Coles.
Never mind.
Okay.
I just want to get done.
Anything else under this fund? Next fund, Mr.
Commuter
Duffy.
parking fund. Page 168 is the narrative. Page 169 is the target level, which is down significantly, and that's because last year we built a train station. And page 170 and 171 are the line items. 170 are the revenues. 171 are the expenditures.
Any comments? Okay, next fund.
Actually, can I make a comment before we move on?
Yes.
Regarding a conversation I had with Mr. Forrest. On the income side, the Metro Depot rent, the current occupant of that coffee shop is losing, as I understand it, $1,000 per month. If we continue charging the rent, he's basically going to have to shut down and put in 2 coffee machines. So at some point, if you don't want to do it tonight, we may need to talk about adjusting that. I don't know if Mr. Forrest, I think, has some updated information.
I can speak to that really quickly. I did have a discussion with a couple aldermen, and we're aware of the issue, and we were going to discuss that at the next staff meeting on Monday, and we'll get that on a committee meeting in the near future, meaning probably the next committee meeting.
And the discussion would be to either reduce the rent.
Lower the rent, whatever option the council chooses. I mean, that would be the topic for discussion, would be lower the rent.
Okay. Does that satisfy, Mr. Mayor? Okay. Next fund. Thank you.
Sanitation fund, page 172 is the narrative. Page 173 is the target level summary. Page 174 is the revenue for this, and 175 are the expenditures. This is pretty much money in, money out. We collect sanitation bills from our residents, and we pay a fee to the waste hauler for scavenger yard waste, recycling, and general garbage rates.
Alderman Eugene Wesley.
I have 2 questions. The recycling bins, since we're going with the new company, should that even be there in the refuge containers? Sales of refuge containers, should they even be there? Because we aren't going to sell them anymore. I mean, it's $600, but it shouldn't be there because we aren't going to sell them anymore. They're buying them all back. So that should be eliminated, both of those. It's under miscellaneous on page,
Sale of recycling bins?
yeah.
100
Same thing
bucks.
with the revenue containers, refuge containers. We aren't selling them anymore.
You're right. You can knock, you can
So
knock
those should be
100
gone.
You could knock $100 out of that.
And 500 for the other one.
Yeah.
They shouldn't be And then is a discount is still going to continue for the seniors?
Yes,
Is that for the garbage?
yes.
Okay. I wasn't sure if that was in the contract. Okay, fine.
Any other comments, questions, sanitation fund? Next fund.
Water Sewer Capital Projects Fund, the next tab. Again, all this does is put into line items the projects that you approved in the CIP.
Any comments, questions? Okay. Anything? Okay, next fund.
Special Service Area Fund, second from the last. And this again is money in, money out. We've got some SSAs that we're paying some debt off on. We collect property tax. we pay out interest earnings, or we pay out, we get a little bit of interest, and we pay out some principal and interest, money in, money out.
Any questions on money in, money out? Okay, then if that wraps up funds, I'm going to go back to Alderman Roy Wesley. Do you have anything else?
And before you leave tonight, I would like a motion to preliminarily adopt the budget so that we can begin printing it, publicizing it, and getting ready to have the ordinance which adopts it on April the 29th.
Okay, before we do that, I'm going to go to Alderman Roy Wesley.
I just wanted to bring up about the lobbyists. Mr. Mayor, you weren't here. It was voted to cut the lobbyists out. I wanted to hear your opinions on that.
My opinion is we should keep it in. Just to give you an update, I don't know what you discussed. Currently, he's working on House Bill 5555, which passed the House, is going to be picked up by the Senate in 2 weeks. That's the one that's going to allow us to annex the property 83 and 3rd Avenue or Oak Meadows Drive, which is going to be a revenue stream for us. He's currently working on the bill that we can use hotel, motel tax money for general revenue instead of just overnight stays in Wooddale. He's working on another item for the chief of police. There's a bill that mandates staffing where the union can tell us how many police officers we have to have on the street at a specific time. The chief has a strong position against that gives up local control. He's working on, you may recall, we have a $100,000 grant from Reb Letty, and we have a $250,000 grant or $200,000 grant from PANCOW. That gets paid out over a 7-year period. And you can lobby with the director of whoever's dispersing the funds as to when you get slotted within those 7 years. So he's trying to get us pushed up to get funded in the first year. He's currently working on a grant for the sewer plant, and he's currently working on the remaining funds for the grade separation. So those are the projects he's working on.
So you feel the $36,000 is worth?
I think the revenue we're going to generate from House Bill 5555 more than exceeds the amount of money we're spending.
So could I make a motion to reconsider putting the $36,000 back in?
Okay, there's a motion to and you were on the, how would that go? You were on the prevailing side of, no, you were on the negative side
I
of
was
it.
on the losing side.
Yeah, you were. So doesn't the prevailing side have to make the motion?
Yes.
Okay.
So the other side has to make the motion.
You were, I think you were on the negative side, the
So the
no's,
other side has to make it? Who, the no's or the yeses?
Yeses.
the yeses. The motion was structured to concur with the cut, correct, Mr. Wilson?
The motion was to restore the funding for the lobbyists since Manager Douthwaite had recommended not to restore it. The vote was 2-5 with Alderman E. Wesley voting yes, which would be, you need the prevailing side. The 5, which was to deny restoring it, was Alderman Shockey, Alderman Winger, Alderman Police, Alderman Coles, and Alderman Lewitton. So one of the 5 of them would need to make the motion to reconsider.
I'll make the motion to reconsider.
There's a motion to reconsider. Is there a second on the prevailing side? Well, is there a second on the motion? Okay, Alderman Cole seconded the motion to bring it back. Alderman Police.
This 555 bill, this is just to annex that property and where's, I don't understand, maybe I missed something. I got it.
Now we're arguing on this, right?
Okay, Alderman Roy Wesley. What's going on, who wants to talk here? Alderman Wright Wesley, and then I'll call Alderman Coles, yeah.
I think it's important to put it back in here because we just heard what the guy does. Ken just mentioned numerous things that we didn't hear just a couple moments ago when we talked about it. So that's why I want to reconsider it and bring it back up.
Alderman Coles.
You know the property? You don't know where the property is? It goes all the way from Central to 83 on the north side of the street, because part of it is still in Wooddale on the south side. The first, we say the first set of houses on the south side. And it goes all the way down to 83. And, no, because the forest preserve is, maybe halfway up Oak Meadow Drive on the south side. And on the north side, it goes all the way to 83. That's the area, supposed to be Oak Meadows, right? Oak Meadow Drive. But the forest preserve from Central to Wooddale Road is forest preserve on both sides. Would the street become ours? All the way
Call the
Okay.
question.
Hang on, I'm leading this meeting. Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, the bill, as I understand it, we can never annex the property because we can never surround the property because of the boundary agreement with Bensonville, so we could never annex the east side of 83. So this bill gives us permission to annex the property even though we don't surround it. So it would be the northwest corner of 83 and Oak Meadows Drive.
Okay, and my position on this is that we did agree to use him as a lobbyist. We tried this, and I'm not necessarily opposed completely to having him perform this task going into this coming fiscal year, but I'd like him to come and talk with us and tell us how close he is, that we're funding him $36,000 a year, and if he can't come and visit us at least once and tell us where he's at and what he's working on, then he doesn't, deserve to have our participation. So let's let him come in and talk to us. I don't think that's too much to ask. Alderman Police.
This 555 bill, if it's going to the Senate soon, I mean, is it basically coming to a vote or just a discussion? Mayor, I'm not sure.
Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, it has passed the House. The state legislature is currently on Easter break. I talked to Senator Pankow today at the Chamber luncheon. She's going to pick up the bill on the Senate side. She'll be the chief sponsor, and the date, who is sitting at my table, that they're adjourning, it should be done by May 7th is the adjournment date, so by May 7th,
So basic,
unless the state unplugs its clock and never lets midnight expire as they do in some years.
so at the end of May, we would find out an answer. So really, we'd give them an extra month if we gave them a notice then, right? But we have to put in 36,000 in the budget right now? Or could we just put in 9,000 right now?
We're going to pay him anyways. We're going to pay him 9 anyways, right?
I'd rather you put the full 36 in, and if you decide you want to pull the plug down the line, you can just direct staff to terminate the contract. But I'd rather that you put the full 36,000 in rather than just 9 and have us to go back and amend the budget down the line. If it's in the budget, we don't have to spend it.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. I'm going to call one more question, and then I'm going to call the roll. Alderman Lewitton?
I wish I could have Eileen read back that part where Wally discussed his attributes and where Eugene said that there was a discrepancy. Well, he didn't say there was a discrepancy, but he said the mayor had certain things that were being discussed with the lobbyist. And I said, well, if they were discussed, they would be discussed between Wally and the mayor. And Wally said he knew of nothing else. He disparaged the man. He said all he does is send out form letters that could have come off of a boilerplate. Now, Wally, are you and the mayor in agreement on what this man is doing?
Well, I guess I take exception to the term disparage. I certainly didn't mean to speak of him in a disparaging fashion. I was trying to give you my own objective evaluation of what we have gotten so far from him. And there are a number of issues that he has been working on per the mayor that I wasn't aware of. I was aware of the annexation. I was aware of the work he's done on the red light cameras. I was aware of his assistance with the DMMC on DuPage Water Commission. I was aware that he was monitoring Pankow and Rebelletti's grants. I wasn't aware that there was some sort of a move to allow this to be dribbled out over the course of 7 years. There are a couple things I think he must have spoken to the mayor on that I wasn't aware of.
And why wouldn't you be aware of the police chief, Frank Benowitz's negative feelings on union staffing of the streets?
I'm perfectly aware of the chief's position on that. I wasn't aware that Mr. Marquardt was lobbying on our behalf down there on that.
Okay, Mr. Luton, can you do a final summary statement so I can call the roll?
Well, irregardless of how the vote goes, I think that the mayor ought to open up a little more with the manager about what's going on, so the manager's a little bit more informed, or vice versa. I'm not making any comments at who doesn't open up, but if you looked at the two reports, they don't look like they came out of the same school.
And I would say that Marquardt isn't communicating effectively then with the administration and with the council. So, that needs to improve, and I still am going to vote no here because I want to see him do the communication before we reinstate the next year. But that's just where I'm coming from. So I'm going to call the roll. Will the minute taker please restate the motion and then call the roll?
Well, the first motion procedurally is just to reconsider, to bring it back on the table.
I thought that passed.
There's been no vote yet.
So we had
You just
Oh,
have
that's
a
good
first and a
point.
second.
Okay, thank you. Then, all in favor of reconsidering?
Aye.
Any opposed? Opposed. Will the minute taker call the roll? Because I'm not sure.
Alderman Shockey. Alderman Winger.
Yes.
Alderman Eugene Wesley.
Yes.
Alderman Police. Alderman Coles.
Yes.
Alderman Roy Wesley.
Yes.
Alderman Lewitton.
No.
Okay, so it's on the table again.
That being
Okay.
done, the original motion that Mr. Wilson referenced is on the table with its existing first and second.
Okay, and Mr. Wilson, will you read that motion? I'm getting late. And Mr. Wilson, did I say Mr. Murmas? Okay.
I knew who you were talking to either way, so. Unless Ms. Schultz would correct me, the original motion was to restore the entire $36,000 funding level for the lobbyist into the budget.
Okay. So that is the motion. Will the minute taker call the roll?
Alderman Shockey. Alderman Winger.
No.
Alderman Eugene Wesley.
Yes.
Alderman Police.
No.
Alderman Coles.
Yes.
Alderman Roy Wesley.
Yes.
Alderman Lewitton.
No.
Motion passes. So now it's back in the budget. Alderman Eugene Wesley.
With your calculators smoking down there, can you tell me what the surplus or what we are facing right now? Doesn't have to be exact, but give me a ballpark. adding and subtracting, whatever.
Boy, for fear of inciting something, just in a rundown, you added back into the budget 1,500 from admin, 1,000 from clerk, 6,000 from central services, um, roughly 11,900 for Bond Dixon, a little over 6,000 for Marquardt and Belmonte for the prosecutions. We took out approximately 8,000 for Mr. Murmas for his salary adjustment into the tourism fund. And then you took out the 36,000 just now for the lobbyist, leaving,
No, we added it back.
added back, correct, reducing the surplus. And I'll round down here a little bit. So the ending surplus, pending final scrubbing, is approximately $191,000. It was 245 and change when you started the evening. So you added back into the budget approximately $54,000.
So we still have a balanced
You still have
budget.
a balanced budget by $191,000.
And not cutting any services at all.
Correct.
As far as I'm concerned, it's a good budget to me.
Okay, then Alderman Wesley, did you have a comment also in addition to that before we do the overall budget?
Oh, I'm ready to make the motion to approve the budget.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor.
I do have a question, not wishing to prolong this, but I do have a question. A few years ago, we kind of lost track in the budget of our grant money, and the council made a direction to create a special grant fund. I think that probably got lost this year or last year or something. And are we, I guess my question is, are we keeping track of that, the balance of the money on the grade separation? The other $75,000 grant we got from Rebeletti, or the $100,000 or the $250,000, even though that's cash not in hand, it's still revenue we should receive. And are we accounting for our grant money? I know the police department gets a lot of grants too, and the kids can't smoke them here. Is that all mixed into this budget somewhere else, or do we have a special grant fund where we're keeping track of that?
A couple months ago, or so, maybe 3 months ago, you issued the statement on where we were at. I know Mr. Wilson, and so do you want to take it?
Well, there was a lot thrown in there. We do have on the books, and it gets audited, a grant fund where